Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So we are super excited about our guest today. You know, we find awesome people. We know we expose you to a lot of different things. And Betsy is coming on today to talk to us about somatic experiencing. It is a method for people to learn to get in touch with their mind and body connection and get over not only past traumas, but deal with stress and trauma that happens in their life going forward. So she's had a ton of training on this. She does this full time for a living. She's got life coaching experience that she uses in the business. She's worked with animals for a long time. And she's a super interesting gal. And we're really excited to have her on the program. So without further ado, let's bring her on right now. So, Betsy, welcome to Salty Ginger Talk. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, very excited. You and I had a great conversation a little over a month ago at this point, and like we talked about right before we joined the program. I am super excited because you do and know a whole bunch of things that I don't do or know, and I'm very excited about exposing our audience to those and letting you explain those to us in great detail. So that's what our expectation is. So we're very excited about it. So would you mind just
Looking
kind of
forward to it
introducing
too.
yourself? Yeah. Would you
Sure.
mind just introducing yourself and briefly talking about who you are and what you do, and then we can do the deep dive after that?
Oh, brevity. I'm not sure I can do that. Let's see. Okay. I am Betsy Kudlinski. I am a somatic experiencing practitioner, first and foremost. I also have training as a life coach, and I have 35 years working professionally with animals under my belt. So I bring all of that stuff to somatic experiencing and what I do with the humans that I work with. A lot of people ask me if I work with animals with somatic experiencing, and I don't. Although I do, because we're animals. So I have,
You and
yeah,
I totally agree on that point for sure. Like humans are animals. Yes.
we are animals
100%.
and we pretend like we're not. And that gets us in trouble all the time, including in how we handle stress and big events and traumatic events and day to day everything, right? The way that we pretend we're not animals and we inhibit ourselves and we stop ourselves from feeling and we stop ourselves from reacting and we stop ourselves for whatever reason, right? That creates trauma. And so somatic experiencing is first and foremost a trauma resolution modality. And although I work with trauma all the time, I don't always use the word in my sessions, in my groups. We're working with stress, we're working with the nervous system, we're working with joy and happiness and anger and fear and sadness and grief and shame and all those squishy emotions and the body. Somatic is referring to the body. And so how stress and trauma and everything are held in the body, even if we think we're over it in our thinking brain, even if we think we're over it, we're not. Sometimes we are, but our body is holding it. And that's what somatic experiencing is working with, as well as intellectual, as well as all the other stuff. Did I answer all your questions, Joe?
You answered my first question. There's many, many questions coming your way. So I appreciate that. That was a good recap, and I appreciate you defining what somatic means for me and my audience. Let's start with animals, and we'll work our way to the most what's the right way to say it? Maybe the most thoughtful animal, which is the humans at the end. So
at least
how did you get?
We are, right?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly right. You hit the nail right on the head. So how did you start? What was your start of working with non-human animals?
Non-human. Oh, love that. Um, Well, I grew up with a ton of pets, right? We just always had animals in the house. My parents were natural history people, so, and they had been biology teachers. So, like, if we found a chipmunk baby or whatever in the yard, we would bring it in the house for 24 hours in a little terrarium, and we would learn about it for 24 hours, and then we would let it go. Snakes, spiders, turtles, chipmunks, whatever, right? Plus all the pets. And then I was your traditional horse girl, as traditional as they come. I don't really know if there's a specific type of horse girl, but um I was one of those horse girls that can't actually afford their own horse. And so I worked at barns all the time. So starting when I was like 9, I started mucking stalls so that I could ride more. And then starting at like 12 or 14, I started working for my riding lessons. And then I started teaching riding lessons as a late teenager. And then I went to school for horses. And then I decided, I don't want to be pigeonholed with just horses. So I ended up working at a zoo for 6 years, which was totally great. I worked with all the different animals in the zoo. So they had farm animals there. And then I also worked with, the big ones, not big ones, but tigers and monkeys and bears and fun stuff, wolves. And then I left that and had a sad, sad era of my life where I was not working with animals and I was working in retail and it was awful. And my body crashed because it was awful. And I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and it was horrible. And then as I was able to come back to work, it was like a year and a half, I think. I found horses again. I was like, there's got to be something in this world worth living for. So I went back to horses, and then I went to working at farms. I worked at a goat farm, and then I worked at a diversified farm that it was pigs and sheep and cattle and chickens. And then I worked at a creamery where I made cheese and everything. So my entire history with animals tends to be like, it really is that long. Like, it really is the 35 years of working professionally with animals. So I just like outlined a litany, and it's just kind of bizarre to kind of go through it all as I'm talking to you.
To look back on it is strange.
Yeah, it is. It's wild. It's like, oh yeah, I really, yeah, I've earned my years.
Totally. Well, so now you live in New England, right?
You. I do.
Yep.
I live in northern New England. I've bopped back and forth between Vermont and New Hampshire for several
And
years.
I lived in New Hampshire for 15 years, so I don't think people realize how rural most of New Hampshire is. There's a couple of big cities, Boston being the most notable one. But once you get up north of Massachusetts, it's essentially Vermont, Maine, and New Hampshire. And so there's tons of animals and tons of farms. So you are absolutely
Yes.
in the right area of the country to focus on and work with animals. So that makes perfect sense. What was it about horses that attracted you to them originally? Do you remember?
Originally, I mean, they're fucking cool,
That's a good enough answer for me. That makes
right?
perfect
And you
sense.
get on top of them and you go fast. And then you
Yeah.
jump things and go fast. Like, I mean, seriously. For a tomboy, that's like the best thing there is. Plus, you can get dirty, you mess around in the barn, you get dirty, you get strong, you get tan. I mean, it's like just fun.
Yeah.
It's
It's like the
fun
perfect
to be
world.
working. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And you don't have to mask. And I could be using that as like a autistic phrase, right? Of masking. I'm I identify as neurodivergent, but that's not the point. Like, when you're around horses, you have to be you. They know when you're not you, right? When you're around your parents, when you're around, other humans, God, don't even get me started on high school, right? You are not you. You have no freaking clue who you are. But when you
Mm.
are around animals, you get to be you. You have to be you. And I think that that's my saving grace all the way through. Is the only reason that I've crashed twice in my life. And like the reason that I'm still here is because of that entire litany, that entire 35, 40 years of just inundating myself with animals.
Yeah, I love that you say you don't have to mask and you get to just be you. Um, I've always loved dogs, and dogs have always loved me. And I look at that as a ringing endorsement of my character because I think dogs can really sense the difference between a person that is good and a person that is not good. And that's not self serving. I truly think dogs can sense who they can trust and not trust. I think they have an innate ability to do that. And you certainly worked with a lot more animals than I have. I've never been around horses in any meaningful way, so they may be similar. But I've always felt that way about dogs. I say a lot. I like dogs a lot more than I like people most of the time. A lot more.
Here. Yeah, you're here. I
Yeah.
consider my dogs my family, right? I've got three of them squished around me at this moment.
Yeah. So it's a joke, but I always tell people, if you want to know if your dog or your spouse loves you more, lock them both in the trunk of your car for a half hour. And when you come back, see which one's happy to see you. And that will tell
That would
you,
be a cool day.
that will tell you which one loves you more. But yeah. So how did you get into the somatic experience work that you do from where? So you've been working a lot with animals. You did retail. That was a terrible experience. I worked retail for 10 years. I agree with you. It's a terrible experience. Um, it didn't impact me as negatively as it impacted you, but it certainly was not good for me. Um, how did you make that transition from there to the work that you do now?
Um, Probably 10 or 10 years ago now. Um, I started looking at my symptoms, whether that be my fibromyalgia symptoms or my hypervigilance or my dullness, right? Because I would go back and forth between the two of like not reacting to anything or being utterly on edge and jumping out of my skin.
So like caring,
And
caring, caring way too much or not caring at all. Is that the right way to think about it?
yeah, I mean, we often think of hypervigilance as like the one that we hear all the time is ex-military veterans, right, who've been through a lot, and then they hear fireworks or something like that, and they
Mm.
are brought right back. But they're also always alert for something. I think of the Born Identity,
Yep.
um,
Okay.
where he is just like every single moment he is aware of everything in his vicinity,
There's a
right?
6'3"
Not
guy over there. The exit door's over there. That like right, that type of
exactly,
stuff. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. So that's hypervigilance. Being shut off and dull would be like, I have no idea what's going on in the, whoa, I'm in a restaurant kind of thing.
Mm.
And the in between that on a nervous system level would be healthy. And I hate to say it that way because we're all healthy, we're all alive, right? There isn't healthy or not healthy on a nervous system level unless you have like multiple sclerosis where there's like eating at the nervous system, right?
Mm.
But if you if somebody who's I would say well regulated, which we can talk about later, is sitting in the restaurant with Jason Bourne and me from periods of time in my life, right? This person would be curious about what's going on, but not logging it all in. They don't necessarily have to remember anything that's going on, but like they're aware that they feel relatively safe, or they're aware that it's really loud and they can't hear each other. So, they're just kind of alert. They're maybe a little extra alert, maybe paying just a little bit more attention to the person across from them as the noise level rises, right? Not shutting everything out, aware of their surroundings, but not logging it all and remembering it all and knowing they know where the exit is inherently because they're curious and they look around when they sit down. Oh, there's the bathroom, there's the exit. Okay, cool, good. But it's only on an innate level, right? So that's uh hypervigilance is Jason Bourne. Frozen and dull and just bleh would be where I spent a lot of time. And I started to look at that and I started to, I think I was introduced to trauma symptoms. I don't even remember where. I was like, man, some of this, some of this stuff, there's a lot of, wow, this really describes me. But I had a really good childhood. I don't know what the problem is. Nothing has ever happened to me. Nothing bad has ever happened to me. I had a great childhood. I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah, there was one sexual assault, but like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Like, even that was not a big deal, right? And still, I had all these symptoms. And I started to look and I didn't really research. I started to be interested. And then as time went on, I started to look at, they call them the ACEs studies. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's the um, Adverse Childhood Experiences study.
I've
And
not.
this was by Kaiser Permanente, and it was a long-term study. And because it was Kaiser, which is an insurance company or a healthcare company, it was mostly middle class, mostly white humans in America, and it looked at like there's like 10 different things. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, divorce, death, um, several other things that can happen, and it's this survey that asks how many of these things happened to you before you were 10 years old. And um and then they tracked these people all through their lives, and it was wild how many of these people, if they had one of the aces, then they were, a percentage predisposed to heart disease or type 2 diabetes or a chronic illness of some sort later in life. And if they had two, it was exponential. It wasn't just like times two, it was exponential. If they had three, it was even more. So I was exposed to this and I was like, well, I mean, it could have been one. I mean, I guess it could have been one of them. Again, still thinking I had a great childhood. And then fast forward 10 years to now, I'm like, oh, well, there's at least three of those in there.
Mm.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, okay, okay. So I've got trauma. Even if I don't remember that anything bad happened to me, there's something in my system. And so I started to look around, I started to read, and I found somatic experiencing. One of my friends suggested I read the first book that the guy who started somatic experiencing wrote. And the thing about SE is what we call it, is that it is like it's bringing together some psychology, some neurobiology, some indigenous or ancient wisdom traditions, a ton of ethology, which is wildlife, wild animal behavior. So just watching wild animals. Um, and then history and stuff, and bringing it together in a way that can be taught and used. And it just, because of that animal behavior piece, it just felt to me like it slid under everything I've always done. It just makes so much sense to me. And I can just look at humans, not look at them, but like talk to them and like, oh, cool. What's up with you? Right? Like sometimes it's awful things and sometimes it's like, no, they didn't always have lunch when they were growing up,
Mm.
or um they were born via C-section, or like it doesn't have to be war and earthquakes and rape, and it can be, we call complex trauma is like a series of smaller things over time. It could be big things, but it's over time. Developmental trauma is what the ACEs study is some people call it between 1 and 3, or 0 and 3. Some people it's like 0 and 7. Some people it's 10. Some people it's 25 when the brain finally finishes baking. Um, which is interesting right there. I don't work with vets, um, but if you look at developmental trauma as when the brain finishes um, maturing, most people go into the army before that.
Well
So I
before,
think
yeah, you're
that's
right.
just I think that's an interesting thing right there. That just popped into my head. I don't have expertise there. I don't want to go there particularly, but it's fascinating to me.
Sure.
Um, so I found it. I found a practitioner, and then I was like, holy hell, I have to do this. I have to, this is me. So I went through the training, and now I work with it, work with somatic experiencing with my understanding of animals and animal nervous systems and animal behavior, and a little bit of life coaching. Um, with I work one on one, and then I work in groups. And I love to talk about it, which is why I'm talking to you.
Well, we love learning about it because like I said, I knew nothing about this. So I love getting the education. I love exposing our audience to it. So, somatic experiencing, when you work with someone, are you helping them learn about this trauma and how it's affected their body? Is that the right way to think about it? Is that what you do?
Yes, and I am helping them. So, so yes, we're identifying things because we have a couple different types of memory, and some of it we remember with our brains, and some of it we remember with our brains and our bodies, and some of it only our bodies remember. So sometimes our bodies will express something, a twitch in the shoulder, or a frozen shoulder, or um, a really tight lower back. I'm not saying that all of these things couldn't have medical reasons, and we
Sure.
always ask people to do check with doctors first. But sometimes it could be uh, um, in one of Peter Levine, who started somatic experiencing, in one of his books, the frozen shoulder is from a first responder who saw something absolutely horrific as he was reaching down to help somebody. And that just got completely stuck in his body. And he thought it was like an over and done thing. Um, and so sometimes it's intellectually understanding what's happened to us and working through the meaning piece. But we've got so much more going on for us. There's emotions, those wishy washy things, right? There's emotions. And then once I've worked with somebody, usually people can't do this right off the bat, but they can feel their face flush. They can feel heat or buzziness in their chest. They can feel numbness on the surface of their legs. They can feel a churning gut. And then it gets more and more minute. And we just work with those somatic, body centered pieces. And we allow them to become whatever they need to be. And sometimes it feels really woo woo, granola, crunchy, like what the fuck is going on? And sometimes it makes all the sense in the world, right?
Sure.
If our prefrontal cortex is aware of what's going on, like if our brains remember the incident, then we're like, oh yeah, we were reaching for the thing and then it stopped and we couldn't reach for the thing anymore. Right? Or if we're remembering an assault, right? When we froze and just let it happen because there was nothing else we felt like we could do, we can allow that to move through the body, and we can go through the motions of fighting somebody off. Even though we couldn't do it in the moment, afterwards our bodies need to just let it out and go through the motions of doing that. And sometimes that just completely clears it from the body. It's not like we go and rewrite history. We allow our bodies to finish doing whatever it is. Now, what I will say, Joe, is that the first time that we work together, or even the 50th time we work together, depending on the human, we don't often get to those motions. First, we have to get through the masking. First, we have to get out of sheer overwhelm that this world induces. And then we can start to work on what's underneath.
So you've talked about masking, or you've mentioned masking a couple of times in our conversation already. Can you talk about it more in more depth and kind of explain what it is for me and for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have a professional research-based background in autism. So I'm going to talk about like general masking as opposed to specifically autistic masking. But it's pretending. It's putting on, it's performing. It's putting on, putting a good face on a bad situation. It's pretending like what somebody said to you didn't hurt. It's smiling through a day at retail and being kind to everybody as if your life isn't falling apart and your husband didn't just leave you and you are all by yourself in the world, right? That is a mask, pure and simple, right? I found that's one of the worst things about retail is that you show up and you have to be the exact same every single day while humans are screaming at you as if you aren't a fellow human.
Mm.
Right? So that's masking to a huge degree. But so is, trying to fit in high school or in your darts group or in your knitting circle, right? Is just trying to fit in when you don't. And what you really want to do is just throw the stupid dart at the wall and, be an asshole. Right? But you're trying to fit in by, in a knitting circle, gossiping about the neighbor, and you're like, I don't give a shit who she's sleeping with. Like, that's her business. But you're laughing along with it. So that's a little bit what I would term masking, like everyday masking, being polite when we don't feel polite, or being an ass when we're actually a real softie. Right? Like it can be. Hey,
you're looking directly at me while you're saying that. That makes me a little uncomfortable, Betsy.
I wouldn't presume to have any idea who you are.
But no, it's funny while you were talking. Um, I am not like you. You've used woo woo and a couple of other crunchy granola. Those are funny ways to describe it. My own personal nature, and I only bring this up as a comparison. If you think about statistics, and I'm a big math guy, so I love statistics. It's by far the best math class I ever took because it really helps me process the world. And that probably says something a lot about me anyways, because that's how I look at things is what's the data tell me? That's how I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
My my emotional depth is way out on the bell curve because like you talked about, I don't want to put the mask on. I don't generally. I just say, but this doesn't fuck you. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You go talk to somebody
You
else
have
about that.
that privilege, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Why do you think that
Yeah.
is? Why do you think that is? Why is it different? Why is it so different for some people? Why, maybe you don't know. I'm just curious.
Um, so the gimme answer right there is you're a white dude. You're an older white dude. And you get to be whoever the fuck you want.
Got it.
And nobody's gonna challenge you, right? That's the gimme answer. Another answer is, and there are levels underneath that, right? There's white women, and then there's non non-white men, and then there's non-white women, and then there's people who literally have to hide from the government right now, um, and and each of those people have to be incredibly careful of what they show to the world because the Me Too movement, right, was all about like it brought to light how much women hide. And sure, yeah, that's hiding all of the sexual assault and horrible things that mostly men, do to women and get to do and get away with because they're a really good swimmer in college or whatever, right? And that's more important than the woman's mental health for the rest of her life. But it's also just walking down the street, right? As a, you know, human socialized as female, I am fully aware that walking down the street, if I am in the dark, I should have something to hand so that I can counter any attack. And I need to stay in the light as much as possible. And I need to, right? So that's not masking. That's being aware of my surroundings, and it's just unfair, right? But I also have to pretend at the same time that I am not looking around at all. I have to pretend that I'm utterly confident. I have to pretend that nothing bothers me and that I can't run no matter how. So, what my body is telling me, so this is where we get into like what my body is telling me is I need to scurry, I need to run, I need to really pay attention very carefully, my head on a swivel, my ears all open and hunched, right? And what you could notice is that activates a predator drive in predators, right? If you think of a lion, they're always like, don't run, right? Don't turn your back, don't run, because it activates the predator drive, right? But so it's my body is telling me to run, to flee, to scurry, to be to show my terror. And I don't get to do that for all the reasons. And so that's one of the ways that you get to be whoever you want to be, and a lot of people don't. Another way is that humans are social animals. We must have each other in our lives. Anybody who, I'm going to say something very controversial. We can circle back to it if you'd like. Anybody who thinks that they are a lone wolf is traumatized into that. Our country makes us feel like we, have to be independent and that we have to live and do everything by ourselves. And that, like, literally, literally goes against our animal nature of living in troops, tribes, communities, villages, whatever you call the group of humans. And so we have this drive to be around other humans because it is a lifesaver. Physically, it saves our lives to be around other humans. But then we have, because of the way our culture works, we don't all, we, we're also, we're also fucking traumatized that we all, like, we can't be ourselves and belong, or we don't believe, there we go, we don't believe that we can be ourselves and find belonging in a group of humans that will take care of us and that we can help take care of. And it's like a hard scrabble thing. Like we always feel so trapped and alone. And then if we actually, because we've been taught that you don't be that, you can't be that. So that's a really glad that you are able to be exactly who you are. I'm really grateful that there are humans out there because I'm so used to working with people who haven't been and who are hiding so much of themselves and feel so isolated and miserable. And so this is actually super fun to talk to somebody who can't identify with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can certainly grasp it, but I shouldn't say never because global statements are almost never true, but it's very rare for me to experience the things that you've just described. I do find it curious that it's been that way my entire life. So even as like an 8-year old, I was this way. It's more pronounced for sure now that I'm an adult. And I'm 53 and I've got some life experience. And what that has taught me is absolutely nobody has this all figured out and nobody has all of the answers. And so why would anyone put a whole bunch of stock or merit in another person's opinion when they're just trying to figure it out themselves? They don't know. They don't know any better than
There's
I
so
do.
much freedom in that. I find so much freedom in understanding that everybody's in their own shit.
Yeah,
And
they
so
are. It just
every
is true.
every reaction that you get from anybody, almost definitely, I mean, unless you're a complete like sociopath or psychopath or narcissistic asshole, right? Everybody's reacting from their own experience. So it often doesn't have dick to do with what you did. It hit them in a bad place, or at least that's
About
the way
them.
that I look at it. Because exactly, it's about them. It's not about you. That is not licensed to go around being an ass. Because you can, especially if you know, like that's a especially if you know somebody well, you can know what their triggers are, right? You can know their buttons and push them on purpose, and that's just not very nice.
Yeah, for sure. So when you start working with someone, what does that process look like? How do you start? How does someone start working with you on somatic experiencing?
Um, so I work almost exclusively virtually. like on Zoom. And so it's easiest to describe that it looks a little bit like therapy. Like it looks like talking to begin with. And then the pauses get longer and I keep inviting you to dip into your body and see what you're feeling. What are your emotions? What does your body want to do right now? What are you feeling inside your body? But like I said, a lot of people can't do that right off the bat, so we end up
Mm.
talking. And I'm guiding a session so that we are getting activated, we're getting agitated, we're getting whatever in whatever way, right? And that's on a nervous system level. So the nervous system is getting activated. Um, and we can call that stressed out. We can call that agitated. We can call that excited, even, right? And then through conversation, I'm guiding it back down again so that we get a little bit calmer. I never say, hey, calm down, right? Instead, we just, sometimes it's like, oh, squirrel. Okay, like sometimes I ask about the weather. Sometimes I ask, like one of the first things I do is find out what you like to do so that when you're really activated, I can literally just without like pretending it's organic, be like, oh, Joe, what do you like to cook when you cook?
Mm.
Right? If cooking's your thing,
Sure.
you can, like we'll start talking about something like that because the nervous system can only handle so much. And so in our first sessions together, I do some education about the nervous system, and then we start figuring out what your nervous system looks like. And that's not like an MRI. That's like, okay, how activated can you get and still feel like you've got a grip? Most of us have no idea. Most of us go right into overwhelm and pretend we have a grip because that's where we live all the time. And how settled, how calm, how still can you get without like shutting down or feeling like you need to jump out of your skin? So we find these edges, how activated and how settled you can get. And then we work within it. Because if we go outside it, we're just reinforcing our trauma patterns and our coping strategies. We're just reinforcing how you've lived your whole life, which isn't, most people don't come to me to keep going the way they're going.
It's going so well. I just want to make it a little bit better. Let me call Betsy.
Exactly. So we figure out where the parameters are and we work within them. And I mean, we get triggered on the tiniest things. And when I say triggered, I mean like that vet who hears fireworks and is all of a sudden on the battlefield again, right? That's the easiest one to talk about. But sometimes it's a tone of voice that reminds you viscerally, if not your mind, of your mom yelling in the other room when your dad and she were breaking up or whatever.
Mm.
Or, a trigger could also be, I mean, it's not always bad. None of these things are bad or good, right? A trigger could be the smell of lavender just immediately puts you in your grandmother's kitchen. And it's just so nice to be there. Right. So we often think of triggers and things like that as bad, but it's just nervous system pathways that are well ingrained, go to all the time.
So a trigger can invoke both positive and negative experiences back to your mind then.
Yes. Yes. And usually when we're talking about trauma, we're working with the quote negative experiences.
Sure.
And we would call the other one a resource instead of a trigger. But technically, I mean, it's a nervous system pathway. It's an impulse that the brain does. It's a shortcut from one thing to another.
Got it. So do you and I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but is the ultimate goal to teach people how to manage their nervous systems when they're in various situations? Is that what you're trying to accomplish?
I actually love that you say that because that is one of my ultimate goals as a practitioner.
Mm,
Um, there are practitioners that only work with trauma and just call it trauma resolution, and that's all they do. I I want to educate people on how they can handle outside situations differently. I don't want to be a crutch. I feel like I'm training wheels until they can ride the bike by themselves, right? And at the same time, yes, we do resolve trauma. We knock off the corners of those really sharp edges.
mm.
We file them down even further. We make it so that that horrible episode with your dad is literally just a memory and it no longer makes you hot or it no longer makes you start screaming at somebody or it no longer, you know, fill in the blank. Whatever your reaction is, whenever you think of or are reminded on a body level of that interaction with your dad, it it's just a memory. It's just a thing that happened to you now. But on a basic level, not just the brain level.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that question, it's one of the things we talk about a lot on our podcast. So we now, we're fortunate. We get really high quality and high caliber people like you to come on and talk about their experiences and what they know and share those with our audience. So we air those episodes 3 days a week. And then there's 2 days a week where I'll air an episode where it's just me talking about a particular subject or a topic. And I always try to do three things. So we usually give 5 tips. So we'll say, here's the topic. We're going to give you 5 tips on how to manage this topic. And within those 5 tips, we always try to keep the structure the same. One thing we always do is give empirical data. We try to give empirical data when possible. Here's the study in psychology today that said this. Here is the research from Dr. So and so that validates this, whatever the case may be. The second thing we try to do is give a real world example of what it looks like so you can recognize it when it happens to you. Because to your point, everybody's situations and circumstances are different. And then 3, we try to give actual real world tip on what to do when you find yourself in those situations. Here is a thought to think. Here is a phrase you can use. Here is an action you can take. Here is a breathing exercise that you can do, whatever it is when you find yourself in these situations to try to regain control of a situation that you feel slipping out of your control. And so for me personally, just for a second, I'll tell you about me personally. My biggest challenge is and always has been my temper. And so I have a terrible temper. And I know some people think they have a terrible temper. I have a terrible temper. And so I've been that, like, I was wired that way as a kid. And so my natural inclination is to challenge and fight. That's what I do. And that's not always a good way. In fact, a lot of times it's the exact opposite good way of handling or solving a situation. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, I learned at a young age that was my big challenge. And it was up to me to figure out a way to manage that effectively so I could get the things I wanted out of life. I wanted to be in a good relationship. It's hard to be in a good relationship when you're just exploding at whoever it is that's around you all the time, because the person that's going to be around you most is the person you care about the most. They don't want to be the brunt of that. Who's going to stick around to get treated like that? Nobody worth having around, right? So I learned, and I'm still learning. Like I say, I learned. I've got a lot of tips and tools. I still lose my temper. I'm not perfect. I live in a glass house, so I don't throw stones. And that was why I asked, is because it's good to deal with whatever has happened to you, But I think it's a fool's errand to think that once you deal with what's happened to you, you're good because nothing else bad is ever going to happen to you again, right? I mean, that's just not life. So I'm
It
just
is not
curious.
like
I'm curious about some of the tools or techniques. And again, maybe I'm jumping ahead. If you want to stay where we're at and work our way there, that's in the conversation. That's just fine. I'm kind of explaining my thought process so that you can figure out how to fill in the blanks. Because you're way more educated, way more experienced in this than I am, and I want to make sure I get every ounce of expertise out of you while we while we have you on the podcast.
so. Most of the people that I work with long term. Although I do work with, like I said, I work with groups, and those are usually either 10 weeks of just specifically learning about your own nervous system every week, or it's every other week for like 6 months or something like that. And um, if I'm working one on one with people, I tend to work long term. I've got people that I've been working with for 2.5 years or more. Um, and although people see change earlier, substantially earlier, they notice when they are, for instance, they might notice the precursor. Begin to notice the precursor to the anger, so that they can calm down earlier. And I don't mean that in like a calm the fuck down, Joe. It would be like a um like, oh, my heart is a little okay. Okay, so I am going to do my breathing exercise now, right? Like it's so there's a huge education piece of like learning your own patterns so that we can choose to interrupt the pattern, interrupt the pathway, interrupt the. So, like, one of the things that SE works with is chronic illness, or like, one of the reasons that I crashed when I was working retail is because I got to the point where I had 30 to 31 migraines every month. And I had that for 5 years before I finally got a diagnosis. And none of the medications actually helped. So, and then, over time, like they went down after I didn't work for a year and a half, and then they started coming back, and then they went down, and then they started coming back, and then they went down. And at this point, I have 2 migraines a year because of the work that I've done with SE. That is not like, oh, what's that trauma piece that happened to me that made me have the migraines? It has much more to do with okay, so my body expresses things through migraines if I ignore certain things, any things, right? So I catch them earlier. I catch those things earlier, and it doesn't develop into a migraine. I haven't had a massive migraine in a couple months, and it hadn't been like, it had been months and months and months and months before that. And it such a relief, right? Like, you just exist, right? If you have a migraine every day, you just exist. Just what you do. So people, like, that's the first thing that changes, is they just start to notice what's going on for them. So you might notice when you were getting angry, even though as of right now, you didn't actually say this, but you might think that you go from 0 to 200 in 0.5 seconds, right?
Yeah, I can do that. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
But I wonder what happened at T, like 0 minus 5 or 0 minus 10, right? That moment of no return, we figure out what's before that. so that there is a return, right? Because if we work at just 0, yeah, no, you're gonna explode. Yeah. And yes, we can absolutely work with that too, right? But if we can catch it earlier, like a migraine, if we can catch it and knock off of those corners, it doesn't have to be some major traumatic thing that happened. It can be behavioral stuff that's just nervous system patterns, coping strategies, patterns. And yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, I think a lot of people come to me not because of recognized trauma. They come to me because they can't feel joy anymore, or because they're just so fucking miserable, or
Mm.
because somebody suggested that their symptoms looked a lot like trauma, even though they don't know. Or they come to me because they know they've had a fuck ton of trauma in their life and they need
Mm.
to sort it out because it's just destroyed like they are as a human now.
Well, so I find it's interesting to hear you talk about trauma because you've talked about it from like a very, I think, at least for me, I won't speak for everyone, but speak for me. So in my mind, when I hear the word trauma, it evokes a very specific and highly intense scenario that happens in a short period of time in general. Now,
Yeah, that's what
that
people refer to as big T traumas, right?
got it.
And little T traumas, I don't see a fucking difference. But little T traumas are things that happened over time or happened really early, we don't remember, or something that we just don't remember. Or um, I would, so what the founder of somatic experience and call says about trauma is that trauma isn't in the experience, it's in the body. It's how the body handled an experience. And so even if it was that one time in elementary school that you had a bad day because the kids were kind of picking on you, or you were really tired and you were hungry and lunch came really late, and then whatever, like you had a bad day at school and then you came home and your dad like yelled or wasn't there, even just that one time, right? Sometimes events can small events can conspire to leave a lasting impression on our bodies, in our bodies, and then we react for the rest of our lives from that place. So traumas are, I use the word liberally only so that we can recognize that we've all had trauma. Our culture is traumatizing. The the You probably know more, but if you're a data dude, you probably know more about this than I do. But the think tanks out there that learn how to keep um, dopamine hits
Oh
going,
yeah.
or
Mhm.
keep cortisol levels up. Cortisol is
Yep.
stress, right? So, and then these think tanks are paid by all kinds of companies to so that these companies can have this information and know how best to keep our chemistry doing stuff that it shouldn't be having to do all the time, right? Remember back to when I was talking about Jason Bourne in a restaurant, right? And the other human that was basically regulated, basically balanced, is just aware of what's going on. Not freaked out unless there's something to freak out about. But, often in a restaurant, there's like a rowdy crowd and there's quiet diners all over, and they know where the bathroom is because they're going to have to go at some point and they remember where the exit is. But really, they feel basically safe in a restaurant. That's how, I don't want to say it's how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be know, supposed to is such a fucked up term, but
I agree with you,
almost
by
as
the way.
bad as it's
Yeah.
almost as bad, right? Um, so there is there is the possibility that a nervous system can hold a basic sense of safety most of the time. That's where we're made to be. That's where a deer in the woods, right? There's predators all the fuck around, right? They never know when one's going to come, but they're getting on with their life. They're not thinking about the next predator all the time. They're aware. They're aware and they're alert and they're ready to go when it happens, but they're not high strung all the time. Our culture, the 24-hour news cycle, the bombardment with all the horrible stories, and you must know all of these things, and you must know all of these things, and all these things are happening all over the world, and plus your neighbor's cheating on his wife, right? And it's not natural for us to get all of that. We're supposed to have a baseline of just like hunky dory doing the thing, and that doesn't mean like stupid, right? That just means that our culture is bombarding us and screwing with our hormone levels, which on a base level, that's our body, that's our nervous systems, right? If our stress hormones are high all the time, then we can't properly react when it's absolutely necessary because we always feel like it's absolutely necessary.
Mm.
And then we can have a big T trauma, right? Because we didn't react properly in the moment, or whatever. It's it's all traumatic because it lasts and it changes the way that our nervous system reacts in the future.
So,
in a way that is potentially unhelpful.
Sorry, say it again. I kind of crossed you there. I didn't hear what you said. My apologies.
Our nervous system in the future, from now or whatever, whenever this happened, reacts in a way that long term is unhelpful, even though it got us through the situation in the moment.
Mm. Do you think, or maybe are there some nervous? So let me preface this question so I went through college on a baseball scholarship. I had a chance to play professional baseball, and that's like a pretty high pressure environment pretty regularly, right? There's thousands of people watching you do what you do. And if things go great, that's awesome. If they don't go great, that sucks. But like I was in that environment a lot. And for whatever reason, I responded really well. I enjoyed being in that environment. Do you think that some nervous systems are better equipped to deal with what life throws at them than others? Or do you think different people's experiences change their nervous systems so that they get out of balance or out of whack? And maybe you don't know the answer to the question, but that's what I was thinking about.
That's where we get into the ACEs study. That's where we circle back to the ACEs study, developmental trauma,
Yep.
Or complex trauma, right? It sets us up for failure when big stuff happens. All right, so I'm going to preface this by saying I do not have the data. I do not know where the study is. I know there is a study. I have talked to people who actually know this stuff. This is the gist of what I remember from the conversations I've had.
I appreciate you prefacing it that way. That's great.
I really don't want to be quoted and told that I'm completely ignorant
but you said, yeah, I don't. That's not how we operate.
The humans that enlist often have had challenging childhoods. In fact, some of the propaganda that, some of the marketing towards humans who have had challenging childhoods are like, they are directly towards those humans. And then they put them in a war situation where they will be exposed to traumatic events, and they are much more likely to come out with PTSD. If I recall correctly, the human that I was talking to was talking about how basic training itself is traumatic. So it brings out anything from the childhood troubles and the developmental trauma, and then sets them up for horrible PTSD. But if we're just looking at the ACEs study, we're looking at physical manifestations of trauma later in life. And that doesn't mean PTSD episodes. That means heart disease. That means type 2 diabetes. That means chronic illnesses. That means far earlier death. That means, so yes, it is proven, actually. I don't have verse and line. I am not religious, so I actually don't even know how to say that. But chapter and verse, I think.
There you go.
That's how you say it. I don't have chapter and verse, but I do know that there have been studies, and the Kaiser Permanente study that came out with the ACEs is, yes, absolutely, there is a huge corollary between trauma very early in life, and sometimes that is absolutely little t trauma. Sometimes it's a surgery before memory, pre-memory, like a surgery. Sometimes it's being an incubator right after birth. And I'm not saying that that's all bad, but so yes. And the other thing is that the ACEs study has another thing, part of it, that if you had a good enough childhood or a good enough a strong enough ally as an adult helping you grow up, then even if you had those things, sometimes you are more resilient towards trauma later in life, towards developing traumatic symptoms, like physical manifestations of trauma.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, I know you can learn these behaviors. I mean, that's literally what you do for a living, is help people learn these behaviors. And sometimes you come across them by accident. I'm such a fan of breathing exercises, and until probably the last 5 years, I never understood why they worked. I just knew that they did. But when I was playing baseball, I was a pitcher, and I don't know how much you know about baseball, but you're involved in every single play as the pitcher. You literally start the play. And so when I would get the ball back from the catcher, I would stand on the mound, and before I did anything, I would take what I called a cleansing breath. So I would take a deep breath in through my nose, and I would just do that before I did anything else. And I did it every single time. I never skipped it. I didn't know why it worked. I just knew it was what I did to start my routine, and it put me in a good both mental and physical place so that I could mentally focus on what I was trying to accomplish, and I was physically loose enough that even with everything that's going on and the pressure and whatnot, my body would perform the way I had trained it to perform in these situations. Well, come to find out that the breathing exercises stimulate your vagus nerve, which kind of resets your parasympathetic nervous system. And like, it was a total accident. I would love to tell you I was that intelligent when I was 15 years old and started doing this, but it'd be a total lie. I just knew it worked. I'm curious how much breathing plays a role in the exercises and or techniques you give people to deal with these situations when they feel them coming on after they start working with you.
There is one super well-known breathing exercise that is integral to SE. It doesn't work for everybody.
Hmm.
There's one. And then, of course, the thing about somatic experiencing is that everybody who comes to SE to learn it, to offer it to others, has another modality. They're psychologists, they're psychiatrists, they're PCPs, they're therapists, massage therapists, they're elementary school teachers, they're life coaches, they have a main modality. And then some of them, like me, turn to SE as their main modality, but we came to it from. So that's why I'm perfectly comfortable having like an out loud conversation with somebody and asking really good questions, is because I was trained as a life coach, right? But I brought in SE and that becomes the thing. So everybody has, like, I know at least two colleagues that I went through the SE training with who have a massive background in breath work. So there is the one major one that's a technique that I try with people fairly early on. And if it's something that works, we use it a lot. And so it goes into their own repertoire. But there are other ways to stimulate the ventral vagus nerve to allow settling, to suggest settling in the body. And so that's one of the things that I do. Like in my groups, I rarely walk people through specific embodiment exercises one-on-one, because I'm just working with one human and we just do it organically. I bring them in and offer them. But when I work with groups, I have like a nice list that I go through of various exercises that mostly are settling. But there's nothing wrong with being activated, right? Being too activated, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
But activation and settling are two, like think of a yin yang, right? You need the balance, right? When we breathe in, it's our sympathetic nervous system coming online to tighten our diaphragm and drop it, lower it, pull it down so that there can become a vacuum in our chest cavity so that the lungs can inflate. And then the parasympathetic nervous system comes online to settle, to relax the diaphragm so that it comes up and the air is just pushed out of the lungs. So they're settling and activating. There's nothing bad about either one, right? They're just, we go up and down. Hoping for steady all the time is hoping for dysregulation. Regulated is up and down and up and down and up and down of varying degrees. So I love that you hit on that and immediately, and then decades later, I mean, it could have been 5 years later. You might be 20. Um, if you started that breathing exercise at 15. You don't want to make any assumption on how old you are. But
I'm 53. It's been a while.
So decades later, you finally, it became public knowledge, right? I was taught 9 years ago. I don't remember how long ago. I was taught by a neurologist that making your exhale longer than your inhale stimulates the ventral vagus nerve and settles you a little bit.
Got it. Now, I noticed on your website that you talk a lot about, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was phrased, but essentially reconnecting with nature. And one of the things you offer is hikes. I don't know if they're group hikes or individual, look like group hikes to me. But can you talk a little bit about what the benefit is, for one, why it's important, two, what the benefits are, and three, how you kind of made those connections?
Sure. So the term that I use is renaturing. I made it up
Renaturing. Damn it. I couldn't think of it. Thank you.
It's okay. It's okay. It's from an essay that I wrote long ago when I was thinking about how in like chemistry you uh, substances get denatured, like they get taken
Sure.
apart into their into pieces, right? And
Yep.
so in my head, I was like, I've been pulled apart into like pieces and just I am shattered all over the floor, and I want to be renatured and come back together again. And some people use the term rewilding, but all for nature, right? And nature is wild, but it's not always. I'm looking out my window and it's pretty tame out there. I mean, it's not. eh, It's just natural, right? And we are natural, even if we're traumatized, right? Like the coping strategies and trauma patterns that we are using come from a natural process of not completing a full activation cycle. Like that's in the of the nervous system, right? Um, and then it gets stuck. And so that it's entirely natural for our bodies to hold that shit. And so renaturing, I love the term renaturing because it's like, yeah, we're not going back to when we were conceived. We are healing. We are finding our balance again, which is what nature is balanced. Um, and then um, we learn, we grow stronger by learning from our and integrating, because a lot of times trauma is like an utter lack of integration of what actually happened. So we integrate what actually happened to us. And then we move on as a different person, but not. We're all the same human. We just are more balanced. So that's what renaturing comes from. But and every time I describe that, I describe it a little differently. So if you read it on my website, it's gonna sound different. Um, so I did say, and it's absolutely factual that most of the work I do is virtual. I work with people all over the US. I work with people all over the world. Um, and so I do that through Zoom. And the groups that I run are almost all on Zoom. So it's accessible to everybody and it's really profoundly effective. Um, and for the lucky few who live close to me, because it's not worth like driving hours and hours to go on a hour long hike in the woods or on a local trail with me, but we do the same thing. We're just not sitting next to each other looking at each other,
Mm.
right? Instead, we're walking and we have this balance, this nature all around us holding us, right? When I'm working with somebody on Zoom or in an office, right, I am holding the container per force until the person can like help hold the container themselves. So I'm holding safety. I'm sitting here and understanding that I am safe, that they are safe, and helping their nervous system get there. I don't talk about it, right? When we go out in the woods, I don't have to hold it alone, right? Instead, it's just held. We're all held out there. Bears or no bears. And we are and there's it's just Shinrin Roku. Is that what the Japanese term for forest bathing is? Um, do not quote me on that. Uh, But we've heard the term forest bathing. It's come out of Japan 10 years. 10 years. And it's another one that we consider a little woo woo, right? But it's that just being in nature, being in a forest is soothing to our nervous system. And so we can go out. I take people out on hour-long walks, and we work through their shit, but we do it in an environment that is conducive to soothing. Sometimes it means that we can work with a little bit more of the hard stuff, and sometimes it just means we don't need to work with the hard stuff. Sometimes it just means that we get to be okay and actually feel okay. Some of us just desperately need to feel okay and understand and remember the feeling of being okay.
Got it. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of getting out in nature. That's one of the coping mechanisms we teach on the podcast is go for a walk. Just go for a walk. Get outside. And even if you're in a city, there's a park somewhere with nature settings in it. Go to the park and walk in and around the park. Listen to the wind rustling the leaves in the trees. Feel the grass underneath your feet. Listen to birds chirp. Feel the sunlight hit your skin. Feel the wind hit your face. There is no question in my mind that that is very therapeutic and calming for every single person on the face of the earth. And a lot of times we're rushing around out in the natural environment and we don't take a minute to just appreciate what it is we're experiencing. And again, look, I'm not a touchy-feely guy, so if I can appreciate that, anyone can appreciate what I just described. Like, it's not hard to do, but you've just got to stop and think about it for a little bit. And it's such a good, you just have to have it as a part of your day every day. Like, I think it's that important.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Sitting under a tree, like if all you have is like the tree down the block, never touch it. I mean, don't hug it. God forbid you hug a tree, but just be close to it.
I don't know. I'm originally from Oregon. There's people out there that hug trees all the time. It's a very normal thing out there.
Yes, I have been known to do that.
So, do you still do any life coaching or do you almost exclusively do SE work now?
Yeah, no, I'm not interested in doing just life coaching. I do SE with life coaching flavor. And each individual human that I work with, we fall into a pattern that is different from any pattern that I've worked with anybody else. Some people really respond to the skills that I have as a life coach. And so I sprinkle those in a little bit more liberally. And some people, it's almost pure SE. And with every single person, I use my skills of reading animals. But that, and I use metaphors that come from the natural world and from animals. But my experience with animals just informs how I work with people. I mean, some people love to hear my stories, but besides that, the animal stuff doesn't come in. But the life coaching, depends. Depends who it is.
But you don't, what you just said, you don't strictly do that. It's through your SE work that you utilize the skills you learned and developed as a life coach.
Yeah.
Yep. So what have I not asked you about, or what have we not talked about that's important to talk about for our audience?
Oh my God, groups. Learning how to be within a group of humans. We were talking earlier about pretending, trying to fit in with a group of humans, right? Mm-hmm. So you join a group and then you just like try you be whatever you're supposed to be, or you you join a group, support group, or a any kind of group, and you just like lay it all out there, and then you get hurt, right? And you're neither one is genuine. We need boundaries. We need to know where our edges are, and that we don't need to like vomit all of our stuff all over everybody else. I'm not saying support groups aren't great. Support groups are absolutely great, but like in a community, um, we hold each other by holding ourselves and including everybody else. And so I've been working with groups for a year and a half now using SE, and I cannot get over the power of the collective. And so obviously, right, like I was saying, when I'm working with an individual, I'm asking them what's going on in their body, right? And so I'll work with a group and I'll offer an embodiment exercise, so everybody is going through it by themselves, and then I invite everybody to share. I work with mostly small groups, and I invite everybody to share their experience. And so it means that everybody gets to like understand that everybody works differently, and everybody did the same experience, and this person got wicked activated by this exercise, and this person just felt so good by the end of it, right? And neither one is wrong. It's just we all work so differently, and becoming a community, right? For me, it usually takes 4 or 5 group sessions with the same people for there to become like I don't even want to say meshing because that's the wrong term, but for everybody to stop like putting on a smile and acting fancy, right? Like being on their best behavior. They start to become a little bit more comfortable with each other, and they start to be a little bit more genuine without just like spewing all over everything. And it becomes this container where we all hold each other in a very supportive, kind, courageous kind of way, not in like, oh, that's so sweet, right? It's just, man, we have lost how to be in community. And when I see it working, it is just the most beautiful thing in the entire world. It's just glorious. And it's exponentially stronger than when we don't do it right.
Yeah. Well, you had talked about how people go through the same thing and have very different experiences. There's personal anecdote. I always try to learn, and I took a course that was taught. It was an online course, but it was taught by a behavioral psychologist, and he did an experiment, and my wife did the experiment with me, and so it was a video. And there were 5 people, and they were all dressed in all black because the point was not to be distracting. And they were all holding an iPad with a blank screen. And they just simply took the iPad and kind of moved it up and down like this. And it was for a minute. And your job, the goal, was to the screen changed colors every couple of seconds. All 5 of the iPads, the color changed every couple of seconds on the iPads. And your objective was to count the number of times you saw red appear on any iPad screen. Okay. So this goes on for a minute, and like I'm left brain data focused. I feel like this is my thing. So my wife's watching, I'm watching. We get to the end of the minute, and he says, "Okay, how many times did you see red?" And I said to my wife, "How many red did you see?" And she said, 27. And I said, "Really?" And she said, "How many did you see?" I said, 62. And there was actually 63, so I missed one somewhere. And then he said, "And how many of you saw me dancing around behind the group in a bumblebee outfit?" And I turned to my wife. I said, "What the fuck is he talking about?" And she's like, "How could you miss that?" So sure as shit, he read that this guy was dancing around behind in a bumble, like in a dressed up like a bumblebee from the Blind Melon video, and I never once saw that guy. But my wife was taking in the whole thing, and so she missed all sorts of screens turning red, but she absolutely saw the guy dancing around in the bumblebee. We were sitting right next to each other, looking at the same computer, doing the same thing, and our experiences were very, very different. So, just it popped into my head when you were talking about people going through the same thing and experiencing something very different. I just have a very easy to describe in real world scenario that fits that. But as it relates to groups, how do you suggest people put themselves in community or group situations? And for, at least from my perspective, that could be anything. It could be a fan club that meets to watch a sports event at a bar. It could be a knitting group. It could be a book club. It could be uh, whatever your natural proclivities are. But how do you suggest people do that in a healthy and productive way?
Hey, if you have fun, do it. If it's stressful and hard for you, uh, stop or um, get curious about why. Is it stressful and hard because they talk about their emotions and you don't want to? Is it stressful and hard because they're toxic humans to you? And remember, I just said to you, right? That doesn't mean that they're toxic humans, but they trigger something in you, right? Or they could be psychopaths. Um, but I always suggest curiosity, like 100%. And um, I mean, there are a lot of people that run groups. So that I just finished up a group that was specifically for people who have a hard time in community or in group, who've had wounds around that. And you know what? I think they're going to go out and be in groups. Like every single one of those humans, I think, is going to feel better about being in groups. Um, Obviously, I run groups, but there are people out there who run groups or who um, curate groups that are, and it could be the fan club, it could be the knitting circle, it could be an SE group, it could be a support group, it could be AA, it could be, like I think I surmise that we like it needs to be curated it at this point because we are far enough away from understanding what healthy community is that it's it's harder to find than we'd like it to be. Once you find one, you start to know what you're looking for. And I mean, I can't. I think we all need something different, and that's one of the things that I tell prospective people, or when somebody's had their first session with me, I always have somebody do one session, and then I'm like, okay, so here's the deal: we've both been on our best behavior. Check the taste in your mouth. in like an hour, 24 hours. Like, what do you, like, did this feel okay to you? And then maybe we can do like 4 more sessions. And maybe you'll feel great and you'll feel good to go after that. And maybe you'll realize that we're not a good fit. And if we work together when we're not a good fit, I'll have a crisis of confidence because I couldn't help you the way that I know this stuff works. You will think SE is a load of crock, and you'll go off like thinking terrible things. I'll go off thinking terrible things, right? So we're all individual humans, right? So there's a gazillion SE practitioners out there of all different flavors, and there's a ton of group leaders, communities out there, and you find the one that resonates best for you. And because we're all traumatized, sometimes that means you're taking the chance that what resonates for you is actually resonating with your trauma. And so it's not actually super healthy for you, but at least you'll feel familiar, right? That's what we do again and again and again is we do things that are familiar to us. Why we get into abusive relationships again and again, because that's familiar. It's not comfortable, but it's what we know. We don't have to question things anymore. That felt
Got
really
it.
circuitous. Sorry.
No, it was good. It's good. If people want to work with you, just go to your website, right? There's a way to contact you on your website.
Yeah. There's a way to contact me. There's links to my groups. There's a link to get in for a first appointment. There's all the things on my website, including I run an email list. I send out a weekly email every Friday morning, usually.
For what it's worth, when we jumped on, Betsy was furiously trying to wrap up because she was behind on her weekly email today. So it's a little inside
I
joke
took
there.
the dogs to the vet this morning and didn't get around to it until later.
Well, Betsy, thank you so much for coming on and educating on this. I would love to bring you back on in about 6 months and revisit some of the stuff we talked about. I find it fascinating. You're very well educated in it. You speak about it in a very easy to understand way. And I think there's a ton of value in it. So if you'd be willing, we'd love to have you back on 6 months somewhere down the road.
Yeah, that would be so much fun. And who knows what's going to come out of my mouth then. I'm constantly learning and integrating new information and understandings of things.
Well, this is one of the things I love about our podcast is I think if someone had a bingo card and they said, "Hey, let's look at Joe and all his characteristics, and let's look at Betsy and all her characteristics, and lay odds on them having an awesome and productive conversation," they probably wouldn't have bet on us. And yet here we are because I found our conversation fascinating and I learned a ton from it. And I really appreciate you taking the time with us.
It's been my pleasure. Honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I see your dogs in the background there. They're trying to get on camera.
Hello. Yes, they are.
All right. Well, Betsy, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on. We will be back in touch and get something set up somewhere down the road. All right, guys. So, like we said, I know I have a tendency to build people up in the intro, and then every time they overperform what I say about them, and Betsy's no exception to that rule. So, super good conversation. Love talking with her about all of the subjects we talked about. Kind of walked us through working with animals, and then she worked retail for a while, and that really affected her physically and mentally, how she got into somatic experiencing and what she does with her clients talked about how you could work with her. She's got groups that she works with, she's got individuals that she works with. She's got a ton of experience in this. So, at minimum, we suggest you go check out our website like we do always. We put it in the show notes so you can get in touch with Betsy. And like we said at the end, we'll have her back on at some point in the future. She's a great guest. And one of the reasons we love having folks like Betsy on is because she is experienced in and can talk about things that we are not experienced in and cannot talk about to anywhere near the depth or expertise that she has. And so we love having all those viewpoints available for our audience and all those things available for you to consider as you're putting together the life that you want. So thank you so much to Betsy once again. We'll have her back on the program. She did a great job. Really glad we got the chance to talk with her tonight. So James puts it up right over there every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All the podcast episodes are available there. Links to all our social media accounts are there. We've got a newsletter we publish every weekday. You can subscribe to there. And please like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. Super helpful for us. We're going to keep finding awesome people to bring on. They're going to keep giving you great tips and advice and things, processes you can use to build a better life. You don't want to miss it. You'll be sorry if you do. Make sure you catch the next episode. We will see you there.